A very good afternoon to all members and friends and supporters of the Southeast Asian Ceramic Society. I'm Boy Chong Wan, the incumbent president, and it's my pleasant duty to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Dr. Annabel Gallop, and delighted that you all made time to come. Let me start with a major, I don't need this, caveat, which is that for those of you who came to listen to something about ceramics, well, I have to disappoint you. Dr. Gallop is not about to talk about ceramics. So don't ask her about Ming ceramics. As she tell you, she knows nothing. We're going to talk about the Arabic script on these plates here. So here, let me get it correct. Yeah. And this has been her current work that Dr. Gallop has been working largely on the Quran, on the decorative and borders and illuminations around the letters that Malay sultans, rulers, exchanged with each other and their European counterparts as they came into contact with them. And in her work on the Quran, Dr. Gallop, I think, has found that the Qurans from Terengganu are the most beautifully decorated and sought after. I don't know if you've been and seen the Quran collection of the Sultan of Brunei. As you know, he has a wonderful collection, but as Dr. Gallop will tell you, the Quran, the text of it is the same, whether you're in Timbuktu or whether you're in Zhangzhou, China. It is the decorations, it is the style of the calligraphy that she's looking at and distinguishes and identifies the locality, the context of that Quran here. Dr. Gallop has made the study of the Malay seals that you see on these letters speciality here. And she wrote an outstanding basic reference text on the Malay seals. And here, for those of you who are maybe wondering how Dr. Gallop got the name Annabel Gallop, as she was telling us, she's a daughter of Christopher Hughes Gallop, a British colonial officer, I think in the education service, and her mother is Tay Siok Cheng from Kedah, and she spent her early years in Putong, Brunei, before going to the UK for further education, accumulating in a PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies in 2002. And she joined the British Museum in 1986 as the curator for Maritime Southeast Asia. And she has been with the museum since 38 years, I believe, and is now the curator for Southeast Asia. So she has at her disposal, and in the British terminology, the keeper for these wonderful manuscripts and texts from the Malay world. And her achievements in this, her study of these manuscripts, has been widely acknowledged. She, I believe, has a Datuk title. Is it from Selangor, I think?
From Kedah.
Kedah, yeah, from Kedah. And more important, she was elected a member of the British Academy in 2019. For those who are familiar with British Academia, once you get an FBA, that's it. You are at the pinnacle of your academic career. You can forget about your PhD already. Yeah, so Dr. Gallop has reached that. In Singapore, I think only 2 people have got it here so far. Lily Kong and her colleague Brenda Yo. They're both elected in 2025 and 2021. And before that, the only other person who got it was Li Xingdi, but not for academic achievement, but his generous support of the Academy and its work. So that's the British Academy. It's an award to recognize the best and the brightest in British academia, as well as in the arts and the social sciences. So that's where we are. We are privileged, therefore, to have Dr. Annabel Gallop speak to us this afternoon on Ming ceramics for the Islamic market. Dr. Gallop, please.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor Kwa, for that very generous introduction, especially coming from an old friend whom I first met when you were director of the National Museum.
Yes.
And your fascinating exhibition on raffles back in the 1990s. And thank you also very much for contextualizing what I'm going to tell you, because exactly as Professor Kwa suggested, I stand before this erudite audience of members of the Southeast Asian Ceramic Society with some trepidation, given my minimal knowledge of Chinese ceramics. So my credentials, such as they are, as intimated by Professor Kwa, is that I do know a little bit about Islamic seals from Southeast Asia. And it is the interplay and connections, real or imagined, between a particular genre of Chinese plates and royal seals from the Kingdom of Aceh that led me into the field of Ming ceramics. And as a result of that, I published 2 articles. The first was entitled Chinese Plates Fit for an Acehnese Queen, and that appeared in the SOAS journal, Indonesia and the Malay World, quite recently in 2024. And that investigated the historicity of the connection between these Ming plates and the Acehnese seal. A second article, published in the Transactions of the Oriental Ceramic Society, the 2023 issue, but actually came out quite late in 2024, is entitled Ming Ceramics for the Islamic Market, Zhangzhou Ninefold Circle Plates with Arabic Script. And that article is aimed more at collectors and curators and presents a typology of these plates. So the focus of my talk today is a particular type of Chinese porcelain dating from the late Ming period, from the end of the 16th to early 17th centuries, which was produced primarily for export and is rarely found within China itself. And I should hasten to add that everything I know about the background and the context of production of these plates is based on the scholarship of others those who are named in my published articles. And I had to learn a lot very quickly. So these wares are much coarser than the fine wares associated with imperial use. These export pieces were evidently made in small domestic workshops and are characterized by imaginative and swiftly painted decoration, with no 2 plates ever exactly the same. And of course, I've just had a walk around the town shipwreck galleries with Joanne Tan, and I think the last time I walked around it, I hadn't started this work yet, but it's exactly the same, the quick brush strokes, the production, coarse, but it could be called coarse, but incredibly imaginative and decorative, and exactly fit for the export market. For a long while, these coarse porcelain pieces from the Ming period were known as Swatow wares, after the Dutch form of the name of the port of Swatow, from which it was believed they had been exported. However, archaeological excavations in the 1990s established that these wares were actually produced at kilns at Pinghe and other locations in Zhangzhou Prefecture, Fujian Province in southern China. So the heyday of these Zhangzhou wares can be linked to the opening for trade of the port of Yuegang in 1567, but had declined by the time of the fall of the Ming in 1644. The death knell appears to have been the decree in 1662 of the Kangxi Emperor of the new Qing dynasty for all residents to be evacuated from the coastal regions of Fujian and Guangdong, after which most kilns in Zhangzhou never seem to have resumed production. One particular design of Zhangzhou ware was evidently produced for Muslim markets. These are large dishes around 35 to 40 centimeters in diameter, usually of white or cream background, decorated with polychrome enamels in a distinctive pattern with a circle in the middle surrounded by 8 smaller circles or roundels, filled and interspersed with inscriptions in Arabic script. In the Islamic world, these dishes were used for medicinal purposes, as drinking water or medicine from plates inscribed with Quranic phrases and supplications was believed to have healing powers. Now, the visual congruence between these Zhangzhou plates and the design of one particular royal Islamic seal from Aceh, from Southeast Asia, the Great Seal of Aceh, has long been noted in Indonesia, as you can see from their juxtaposition from this catalogue of the wonderful exhibition entitled Archipel, held in 2017 in Liège. So the same royal seal from Aceh has pole position on the front cover of my catalogue of Malay seals published by NUS Press in 2019. Because for a period of 250 years, the sovereign seals of all sultans of Aceh conformed to this very striking ninefold design with a central circle surrounded by 8 smaller circles. So this is the catalogue description from within the book. The central circle gives the name of the reigning sultan, while the 8 smaller circles each contain the name of a former ruler of Aceh. Now, this great seal of Aceh first came to the attention of the world in 1891, when the renowned Dutch scholar of Islam and of Aceh, Christian Snoek published a reproduction of the Sultan's seal in his book De Acehnese, which became much more accessible after it was translated into English in 1906 as the Acehnese. So Snoek publication led to the important discovery announced in an article in 1906 by another Dutch scholar, Ware, that the Great Seal of Aceh was modelled on the genealogical seal of the Mughal emperors of India. And he's absolutely correct, and it was quite a sort of staggering discovery when it was announced. Now, the Mughal emperors of India traced their descent from the great prince Amir Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, and in the imperial seals, the genealogy of each emperor goes back to Timur, so the name of Amir Timur is always found at the very top of each of the Mughal genealogical seals. The first Mughal emperor to introduce this design, this sort of orbital design with a central circle with the name of the reigning sultan and the small orbiting sort of satellites with names of his ancestors, was Akbar in 1596. Akbar's own seal had a central circle with 7 smaller circles, but each succeeding emperor would necessarily add another small circle to the border as the genealogical chain grew longer. And so Akbar's son Jahangir's seal had 8 small circles, Jahangir's son Shah Jahan had 9, Shah Jahan's son Aurangzeb had 10 small circles, and by the time of the last Mughal emperor of India, Bahadur Shah, there were 16 small circles in on the genealogical seal. But in Aceh, the Acehnese seal never changed. It always stayed with a central circle and with 8 smaller circles around. And so far, the great seals of 9 different rulers of Aceh have been traced, starting from the first queen of Aceh, Tajul Alam, who was the daughter of the great Iskandar Muda, who reigned in the 17th century, up to the last sultan, Muhammad Daud Shah, who was exiled by the Dutch in 1903. So the crucial difference between the Acehnese seal and the Mughal seal is very striking, that the Mughal seal changed in shape with each successive emperor, while the Acehnese seal never changed, and there were always only 8 small seals. And this is so, therefore, although the Acehnese seal was certainly inspired by the Mughal seal, it was not a slavish copy. It completely reflected the deep local attachment to eightfold symmetry. And this is not something unique to Aceh, but it's found throughout island Southeast Asia. There is a profound affinity for arrangements of multiples of 4 around a sacred center. And this is a very deeply rooted indigenous belief, but it was amplified by subsequent Hindu-Buddhist cosmographical conceptions, as well as with the coming of Islam, where it could be justified with reference, for example, to the four archangels, the 4 schools of law, the 4 stages of the Sufi path. So the first person who documented the link or proposed the link between the Great Seal of Aceh and the plates, the Ming plates that we are now more familiar with, was a Dutch colonial officer in Aceh called Friedrich Wilhelm Stammershaus, and he was a great collector. So Stammershaus was born in Aceh of a Dutch father and a Chinese mother from Java. And he was a passionate collector of local artifacts, all local artifacts, including porcelain. And I love this picture showing him and his wife and family in their house, and you can see just part of his collection on the wall. So Stammershaus's private collection became the Aceh Museum in 1915, and Stammershaus was charged by the Dutch governor of Aceh as its first curator, the first director. And this is a picture of the display in the newly established museum. And you can see one of these Zhangzhou calligraphic plates at the center. You also really get an impression of just how large these plates are compared to the other artifacts. But everything you see in the picture was part of Stammershaus's own collection. When he retired and planned to return to the Netherlands, he offered to sell his collection to the Aceh Museum, but funds could not be found. I think we had a very nice dinner last night, and I think for all institutions, the question of funds when amazing collections come up for sale, it's a recurring issue. So Stammershaus's collection did not stay in Aceh. He brought it back with him to the Netherlands. And he brought back one of these Zhangzhou calligraphic plates, and his personal notebook records his careful reading of the inscription. And I just should say, I acknowledge a lot of people's help, but the one person in particular, his name is John Klein Nagelvoort in the Netherlands, and he's a sort of, you could say he's the Stammershaus groupie, and he's written a book on Stammershaus in Dutch called To An Stammershaus, and I am beholden to him for access to these archival materials, some of which are in his private collection, some of which are still held by the Stammershaus family. So it's really fascinating to see Stammershaus's personal documentation of all his collections. So he eventually sold his collection in 1931 to the Colonial Museum in Amsterdam, which is now the Tropen Museum. And this plate is recorded in the accessions register for 1932 as a large porcelain plate, and the Acehnese name is Pinggan Cap Sikuraan. Now, Pinggan is the Malay word for plate, so Cap Sikuraan means ninefold seal in Acehnese. So this plate is described as, given the Acehnese name, is the plate of the ninefold seal. And Stammershaus's description reads, a large porcelain plate, the plate of the ninefold seal, with a depiction of a ninefold seal of Aceh, probably made to order in China, thus suggesting a causal connection between the design of this Zhangzhou plate and that of the royal seal of Aceh. So this link was then subsequently repeated by other Indonesian writers. So this, what I'm showing you is a very influential Indonesian history book by Muhammad Yamin, a very nationalist Indonesian writer in the newly independent Republic Indonesia, where there was a real push to write Indonesian history from an Indonesian eyes. And this book is called Lukisan Sejarah. And he reproduces one of these plates, and in fact it's the very plate, and it must have been taken from the accessions register. It's the same plate in the Tropen Museum, and it's probably the same photograph. We all know that in the early 19th century, it was not that difficult, 20th century, it's not that easy to get good photographs and this is the same photograph. So we know that Muhammad Yamin got his information from the Tropen Museum catalogue, and he describes his plates simply as depiction of the ninefold seal of the Sultan of Aceh. Now, in her, these are the books that we all use. Anyone who's interested in this ware, goes to these standard works in the field. This is Barbara Harrison's study of the then still called Swatow ware, the Zhangzhou ware, in the Princesseshof Museum in the Netherlands. So Barbara Harrison was a little bit more cautious, and she simply noted, according to Indonesian tradition, dishes such as these were primarily destined for trade in Aceh. Now, the leading Indonesian ceramics historian was Sumara Adiatman, who published extensively on Swatow wares, discussed the Aceh connection in 1981, and she said Swatow dishes with 9 circles containing Arabic script commonly found in Indonesia are said to represent the symbol of the sultans of Aceh in the 17th century, and were specially ordered based on their ninefold seal. And she cites Muhammad Yamin as her source, so we can see how this sort of chain was established. And these comments are reiterated even more firmly in her most recent publication in 1999 on Zhangzhou wares. And so this tradition that the distinctive ninefold Zhangzhou calligraphic plates were commissioned by the sultans of Aceh in the shape of their royal seal is also now finding its way into the online catalogues of museum collections all over the world. And I've just got up a few examples from the Birmingham Art Museum in Alabama, and this is from the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, where it furthermore proposes that the sultans of Aceh were Shia, which is really not the case at all. And slightly more cautiously, but nonetheless there, in the catalogue of the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. But what evidence is there for this tradition? This was important for me. I didn't come to it from ceramics, I came to it from the seals. I was working on the Great Seal of Aceh, and so therefore I needed to investigate this tradition. Were these Zhangzhou plates really specially commissioned by the sultans of Aceh in the design of their seal? So to investigate this claim, I will examine 3 areas. Firstly, the inscriptions on the plates themselves and their typology. Secondly, Aceh's role in the Chinese porcelain trade. And thirdly, the known distribution of these Zhangzhou calligraphic plates. So firstly, to actually look at the inscriptions. Now, Stammer's house read the plate in his possession in 1931, but already much earlier than that, so the first published description of these ninefold Zhangzhou dishes was actually made by E.J. Hunt in 1916, based on 2 examples that he saw in India. One he had purchased himself in Hyderabad, and the other was displayed in the Bibi Maqbara, so the tomb in Aurangabad, the mausoleum dedicated by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb to his wife Rabia Daurani in 1679. So Hunt only published the plate in his own collection, which you see on the left. He didn't publish a picture of the other one, so I've just replaced it with one which must have been exactly similar. But he gives a very full reading of the inscriptions on both the plates. And the interesting thing is that both plates include a Persian inscription naming an individual official as the Khan-i-Hanan, follower of Akbar Shah. So that name occurs in the middle of the plate in the Bibi Maqbara, so the mausoleum, and in 2 of the smaller circles of the plate that Hunt himself managed to purchase. If the reference to Akbar Shah is taken to refer to the Mughal Emperor Akbar, who reigned from 1556 to 1605, during that period, Khan-i-Hanan, Khan of Khans, was a senior military title only granted to one person at a time, and the most likely contender appears to be Mirza Abdurrahim Khan, who was appointed to the post in 1584 and held it till his death in 1627. So Hunt's long article and his description and very detailed reading of all the aspects of the inscription on these 2 plates was simply based on two examples that he had seen. But in fact, this typology has turned out to accurately reflect two major categories of the Zhangzhou Ninefold plates. So drawing on the most accurate recent readings of the inscriptions on these plates, which are improved from Hunt's first readings, I've used Emily Savage Smith's study, which was published in a volume of two volumes of the catalogue of the Halili collection of Islamic art dealing with science and magic, because these plates fall into the category of magico-medicinal plates, because people would use them to drink water from as a medicine. So based on Emily Savage Smith's readings, and going into it also from a sort of graphic typology, type A can be defined as having the Persian inscription with the name Akbar Shah in the central circle, surrounded by other religious elements in Arabic. And these full descriptions are taken from my article in the Transactions of the Oriental Ceramic Society. And this appears to be the most common type, and so far 18 examples have been documented to date. Actually, and I've just been sent one more held in Italy, so 19. So I think one can still expect them to come up all over the place. Type B, which is the type that Hunt managed to buy for himself. In type B, the Persian inscription with the name Akbar Shah is placed not in the middle, but in two of the smaller circles. And there is a Shi'i linked to this plate, because around the central circle there's another inscription on the outer, just on the outside surrounding the central circle. And this is a very well-known prayer calling on Ali. Now, the Caliph Ali is a particular subject of veneration amongst the Shi'is, whereas the Sunni Muslims only regard him on a par with the other early caliphs of Islam. So when you see this particular prayer, it definitely was produced for a Shia or Shi'i context. However, there's also another type which we can call type C, and this example I'm showing you is from the Asian Civilizations Museum. It's currently on display. These inscriptions are wholly in Arabic. There's nothing in Persian, and there's no mention of the names Akbar Shah or Khan or the title Khanan. Now, Emily Savage Smith suggested the term non-sectarian for this group because you couldn't tell from them whether they're Shi'i or Sunni. But I think a simple linguistic qualification that works equally well in this type. The inscription is wholly in Arabic. There's nothing in Persian. Emily Savage Smith was actually talking based on, there's only one example in the Halili collection, which is shown here on the left. So her very, very long and very helpful details as everything, that amazing series of catalogues of the Halili collection. Each of the essays on the objects has sort of the background to that whole genre. And so the essay on this one plate is of real value and importance in interpreting all these calligraphic plates. However, the one example that she shows in the Halili collection, as you can see, is actually a 7-fold plate, not a 9-fold plate. It's only got 6 small circles around the outside. And in my article for the Transactions, I suggested that this could form a 4th category called category D, but there are only 2 plates known, and also this rather beautiful little bowl, which is in the collection of Yaota, which is the only such bowl I've seen, which also, as you can see, the bowl has inscriptions on the outside too. So this category only consists of 2 plates, and 2 plates, so this is the one in the Asian Civilizations Museum, which is also on display. And I'm beginning to question whether these are actually part of the same family of Zhangzhou wares or not, because Alan Chong told me that he thinks this is a Dehua plate, and certainly the little bowl also looks very fine. So in my article, it's down as category D, but the inscriptions are completely different between the Halili plate and the ACM plate, and I think this is the final grouping that needs more investigation to see whether it is. And for this, it's over to all of you, the ceramics experts, to take this further. my work has only gone this far. So to sort of summarize the typology, there are three distinct categories of ninefold Zhangzhou calligraphic plates which can be distinguished on the basis of their inscriptions. Type A with the names of Khani Hanan and Akbar Shah in the center. Type B with the name of Khani Hanan and Akbar Shah in two of the smallest of the eight smaller circles. And type C, which is wholly in Arabic with no Persian elements or mention of Akbar Shah. However, I can suggest some quick and simple graphic ways of telling them apart for those who don't read Arabic script. And even for me, I would have to take an edition of the Quran to actually work out all the different inscriptions every time. So the easy way is type A has no inscription surrounding the central circle, and that's a very, very clear indication. Type B and type C both have inscriptions around the central circle, but between the small 8 circles, type B only has one word, Allah, and even if you don't read Arabic script, I'm going to move there and point it out. So it's just got one distinct word which you can normally make out repeats between each of the 8 circles. Whereas type C has 2 words. It's got Allah at the top, and it's got the names of there's Uthman, I think. Yes, Uthman. So anyway, it has a range of different, could be names of the different caliphs, so it could be Muhammad as the second name. So this is a very quick and easy way to distinguish in which category. And once you've done that, the inscriptions are all the same in each of them, and you can go to standard reference sources, Emily Savage Smith on my article, to get the full readings. Type A is the most common, type B is and type C is the least common. And the type D with 6 circles, as I say, that's the category that needs further investigation. However, to come back to my research question, what's the connection with Aceh? From a close reading of the inscriptions, there is no connection with Aceh. There's nothing to suggest an Aceh connection. However, a Mughal link is much more possible with the names Akbar Shah and the Persian title Khani Hanan, which was never found in Southeast Asia. So one hypothesis is that perhaps originally a plate or a set of plates might have been originally commissioned by the Khani Hanan at Akbar's court in the late 16th century, and this was thereafter a prototype of sorts for all or most of the Zhangzhou plates with Arabic inscriptions. But the next point I want to investigate is Aceh's role in the Chinese porcelain trade. Now, by the late 16th and early 17th century, Aceh was the most powerful Islamic kingdom in Southeast Asia. It was the port of choice for Muslim merchants from the Indian Ocean world who wanted to avoid Portuguese-occupied Malacca, and thus Aceh was a very important staging post for Chinese trade to India. The Chinese brought porcelain and other wares to Aceh, returning with pepper and Indian cloth. And from Aceh, Chinese porcelain was in turn shipped to India by Gujaratis and merchants from the Malabar and Coromandel coasts. With the establishment of the Dutch East India Company factory in Batavia in 1602, the Dagregisters, or daily registers of the harbour master, became an invaluable source of information on both foreign and inter-island shipping. And these registers distinguish clearly between coarse wares, likely from production centres such as Zhangzhou, and fine porcelain, which would primarily have come from the imperial kilns at Zhangzhou. And there are numerous references to the role of Aceh as a centre for the importation of Chinese porcelains. So in this very helpful study on the porcelain trade by Volker, one of the most striking references is that in 1634, the king of Aceh, at that time Iskandar Muda, ordered a shipment of coarse porcelain, and this order was fulfilled 2 years later in 1636. It totaled 120,400 pieces, representing almost a third of all Chinese porcelain transshipped to Indonesian ports through Batavia that year. and that was just from the Sultan of Aceh. So it does emphasize what an important role Aceh played. I mean, it might have been for use and also for reselling by the Sultan. So, nevertheless, the strongest arguments against the suggestion that the Zhangzhou Ninefold plates were specially commissioned from China in the shape of the royal seal of Aceh comes from a consideration of chronology. Archaeological evidence suggests that the kilns in Zhangzhou which produced the Zhangzhou wares peaked in production in the Wan Li era from 1572 to 1620, with a marked decline by the end of the Ming dynasty in 1644. And these broad parameters are confirmed by the evidence of shipwrecks, with only small quantities of Zhangzhou ware found in the Hatcher cargo dated to the 1640s. However, the earliest documented example of the royal Ninefold Seal of Aceh is that of the first queen, Tajul Alam, who was the daughter of Iskandar Muda, and she came to the throne in 1641. And I mean, the Great Seal of Aceh is a subject I've worked on quite intensively, and it seems to be quite clear that Iskandar Muda did not have a seal in this shape, but that it was introduced during the reign of Tajul Alam, who came to the throne in 1641. As such, the creation of this places the creation of the Royal Acehnese Ninefold Seal towards the very end of the period of production of these Zhangzhou wares, or even after, and makes it extremely implausible that the ninefold dishes with Arabic inscriptions were commissioned from China in the shape of the Royal Seal of Aceh. So the third and final aspect I would like to explore is the known distribution of these ninefold plates in Southeast Asia. And one of the most surprising and even ironic findings to emerge out of this study is that very few Zhangzhou calligraphic plates can actually be firmly linked with Aceh itself. Only 2 are currently known in public collections. Of course, there is this major problem of provenance that for most things we don't know where they came from, but only 2 can firmly be linked with Aceh. That belonging to Stammeshaus now in the Tropen Museum, and one from the Adam Malik collection now in the Museum Keramik Jakarta. Now, in fact, when the Aceh Museum opened in 1915, exhibiting Stammeshaus's personal collection, despite his evident passion for Chinese ceramics, proved by his domestic arrangements, Stammeshaus himself did not possess a calligraphic plate, and the one we see on display at the opening of the museum in 1915 was not his own, but had been borrowed by the Imam of Lam Lom, as mentioned in the handwritten catalogue of the Aceh Museum in 1915. It was only a decade later that Stammeshaus was able to acquire another plate for himself, and it is this plate that he brought back to the Netherlands, which is in the Tropen Museum. It is also surprising that ninefold plates are simply not mentioned by Snoeke Gronier or other Dutch writers on Aceh. And Barbara Lee, who travelled widely in the province researching her book, Hands of Time, The Crafts of Aceh, published in 1989, does not recall seeing any of these plates in Aceh, and I've had several conversations with Barbara about this. And nor is there any evidence of such plates in recent archaeological data. And I'm grateful to Tai Yu Seng of the, I think it's NTU project that investigated archaeological, a collection of 5,000 sherds documented at the village of Lambaro Skep on the north coast of Aceh, that comprise a very high proportion of nearly 50% Zhangzhou wares, but to date no sherd from a ninefold calligraphic plate has yet been positively identified. So, conversely, it can be stressed that Zhangzhou plates can be found across many Muslim regions of Southeast Asia. And in fact, the largest national collection is held in the National Museum of Malaysia, and it's that which was the earliest documented in this book by Othman Yatim. There are 6 in the Museum Negara, and Aceh is never mentioned in the discussion, and there's no association with Aceh in the museum's records. It's also, there are examples also found in the Philippines, as shown in the picture on the right. And conversely, it can also be stressed that they're found in royal collections all over Indonesia. So On the right here, you see a picture of an heirloom in Cirebon, which was published in 1933. And this is a more recent picture found on the internet of the annual ritual cleaning of heirloom ceramics in Cirebon. And in the bottom right-hand corner, just above the datik.com, is a ninefold Zhangzhou plate. The other wares you can see look much more like the English and Dutch ware with Arabic script inscriptions made for export in the 19th century to Indonesia. Similarly, an heirloom platter at the court of Surakarta or Solo, said to have belonged to the great 17th century Sultan of Mataram, Sultan Agung, is also said to have, nobody's actually seen it recently, it's very closely guarded, but it's said to have 8 small circles around a central circle. This suggests that of the enormous quantity of Zhangzhou wares known to have circulated in Southeast Asia, the ninefold calligraphic plates were only ever held in small numbers in elite households, and indeed perhaps were never more prevalent in Aceh than in any other Islamic court in the archipelago. However, their undoubted prestige does testify to the profound and enduring appeal of Arabic calligraphy on ceramics in Southeast Asia. In 1796, a young English merchant named John Adolphus Pope, who kept a diary for which we are very grateful, commented that the only ceramics in demand on the north coast of Sumatra were those which evoked Arabic script. He wrote, "We have done but little in disposing of our chinaware. The only kind in demand is a round dish with a number of perpendicular strokes about the edges, which resemble in some measure the Persian and Arabic alif, to which they attach a degree of excellence in being the first letter in the word Allah or God." So anything that evoked Arabic script, even pseudo script or even a straight line, was in demand more than other designs. But already in 1983, Sumara Adiatman was warning porcelain collectors about the circulation of dubious, enhanced ceramic wares, including what she calls, quote, imported white plates decorated locally to resemble the Ming Swatow ninefold plates, close quote. And on a visit to Pontianak in West Borneo in 2013, in a local antique dealer's house, we were shown an array of white plates to which this very nice man, Mr. Bustin, confessed having added Arabic script himself. To conclude, there is no evidence at all for the oft-repeated Indonesian tradition that the large Zhangzhou dishes with the design of a central circle surrounded by 8 smaller circles with inscriptions in Arabic script were commissioned by the sultans of Aceh in accordance with the design of their royal ninefold seal. These calligraphic Swatow plates, Zhangzhou plates, were most likely originally created for the Mughal market, but in passing through Indonesian ports, notably Aceh, en route to India, their striking design, combining Islamic inscriptions and the ninefold layout so profoundly symbolic in the Malay world, would have chimed deeply with Southeast Asian sensibilities. And it is thus entirely likely that calligraphic plates were ordered from China by the rulers of Aceh as well as other Nusantara elites, becoming revered heirloom pieces in the Muslim kingdoms all over the archipelago. And so my crusade so far has been to sort of debunk the idea that they were ordered from the Ming, especially ordered in the shape of the ninefold seal of Aceh, and to suggest that this is an invented tradition in the spirit of Hobsbawm and other writers. And on that note, I would like to say thank you very much indeed.